Hi everyone, thanks for coming along. I imagine at this late stage in the day, some of you are suffering from a little bit of information overload at this point, and probably the last thing you need is a really complicated, in-depth analysis of how Google's algorithm works. Well, don't worry about that. I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to focus on the key bits that are relevant to you as Magento users. So today I want to share with you some of my own insights, as well as some from the industry at large, to help you make some more informed decisions about your future SEO strategy. Sometimes with all of the hype surrounding SEO, it can be really difficult to keep up and identify the kind of tactics which are the ones that people are going to see as spam from the ones that have real legs and can help you rank your Magento site. So in 25 minutes' time, you're going to have a better understanding of how the algorithm works, but more importantly, you're going to have a better understanding of how the ranking signals it uses have changed dramatically over the last few years. So I'm going to be focusing on two main areas today, and the first one is going to be how the algorithm works, and then the second one is going to be how you configure your Magento website to make the most of what you've just learned. So when we look at how the algorithm works, it's much easier to take a step back in time and look at how it used to work. Back in the day when everything was blue. So back when everything was blue, it was all a lot easier. All you had to do was your keyword research. And you had to optimize your site with these keywords and place them in areas like the title tags. And then you needed to generate as many links as possible. And in these links, you'd stuff them full of keywords and you'd point them at these pages. And you get some really good results. The problem was there was an issue for the users of Google. It was great for us as SEOs or people who work in e-commerce, but it wasn't very good for the users. And Google needed to win the battle of the search engines. It had to give the best results for the people using their product. And it had to look at more complicated signals. So you can see in the past, it was just looking at your on-page SEO and links, and it was a pretty simple algorithm. So it got a lot smarter in order to stop us from cheating the system. And I'm going to show you how it looks now. But before I do that, I just want to explain that us as SEOs haven't always done the best job in the past of communicating with our clients. And we haven't told our clients how the algorithms got more complicated and how some of their expectations can be a little bit more unrealistic in terms of ranking for specific keywords compared to the past. So this is how we think the algorithm looks today. And what you'll see is you have a core algorithm similar to before, but then you have a number of ranking signals or modules all feeding into this algorithm. And all of this is processed in real time in order to give you your search engine results. So I'm going to focus on these different signals and modules in order of priority of how they affect your Magento site. And I'm going to start with Panda. So Panda is a specific module that exists for one reason and one reason only, and that's to penalize your website. And it's looking at the quality of the content on your page. The kind of things it's looking at is the quality of the language you've used on your page. And also, really importantly, whether you've copied and pasted any of that content from another page on your site or another website over the internet. And then it's also looking for other things. It doesn't want to send you to a site with broken links or bad code. And the reason for this is it doesn't really want to send you to a website that looks anything like this. So the next module I want to talk about is Penguin. And Penguin is the same as Panda in terms of it exists solely to penalize your site. And it's also looking at quality once again. But it's not looking at the quality of content on your site. It's actually looking at the quality of those links pointing at your site. It's trying to work out whether you've cheated in the past. So it's asking questions like, is this link a natural link that's been earned rather than generated by an SEO team? And some of the signals it's looking for is if the linking text pointing at your site is stuffed full of some of these unnatural keywords that used to help you to rank a site in the past. It's also looking at where these links come from. And some link farms in the past, any kind of link pointing from that site got penalized. So how do you know if you've been hit by Penguin? Well, you'll see here that this is a classic example, a classic Penguin signature. And you can see on a specific date that the traffic has dropped off really significantly overnight. And this is around the same time as a confirmed Penguin update. And you can look on a website like Moz or Algoroo to find out when these specific updates happen. Now, what you need to know about Penguin is it hits hard and it hits fast. And if you're an e-commerce pure play, it's probably going to break your business overnight. Recovery stories when it comes to Penguin are few and far between. And it really is something you need to avoid. So if you think you may have employed anyone in the past, the kind of people who promised to get you on page 1 within 3 months, I'd strongly recommend getting a link audit carried out. Sadly, Penguin and Panda aren't the only things you need to worry about. Google has a team of people working full-time scouring the internet each and every day, and their sole purpose is to penalize your site. And you'll hear about this through your Google Search Console account. Now, there's a large crossover between Penguin and Panda and what they're looking for and what the manual team are looking for. And I'd advise any of you to just do a search for Google quality guidelines. And there's a video online that tells you a lot about this. But not only that, there's a document doing the rounds on the internet at the moment that's been leaked from Google, which is a 160-page document, which appears to be the training guide for the people who work in this team. And when I read through it, I was surprised to find out that because you're an e-commerce site, because you have a payment gateway, they're far more stringent in terms of assessing you for quality. They categorize you as a your money or your life site. And I definitely recommend giving it all a read. So now we've finally got to the end of the kind of scary bit, the bits in the algorithm that exist to penalize you, the boring bits, the bits you have to worry about. We can get more into the more interesting bits and how we can work on positive, more exciting things in order to help you rank your site. And I'm going to talk about Hummingbird. And Hummingbird was an update to the core algorithm, and it happened back in 2013. And it should have been the catalyst that made all of you change your ranking strategy. So once again, the best way to understand how it works is to show you how things work prior to the update. So prior to the update, the only thing you really need to take away from this slide, and it's pretty hard to see, is that the top organic search rankings had almost exact keyword matching in their titles to the search I've typed in the bar at the top. Now I want to show you how this has changed. So post Hummingbird, I've done a search for how tall is the Gherkin. And for people who don't know, the Gherkin is a tower in the City of London. And the top organic ranking is actually the name of the building, which is 30 St Mary Axe. And it doesn't contain any of the keywords in the search bar whatsoever. Post Hummingbird, it's clever enough to know that the Gherkin means 30 St Mary's Axe, and also the client who resides in that building, which is Swiss RE, also refers to 30 St Mary Axe. And this is because of this semantic processing. Not only that, but it knows that I have a user intent. I've asked a question, how tall is it? And it's given me an answer to the question directly in the search results. So what can we learn from this? What do we take away from this? Well, what you need to know is that exact keyword matching isn't as important as it once was. You'll be far more effective if you try and focus on answering questions and keeping in mind that there are synonyms of all those keywords you were trying to optimize for in the past. And not only that, there's an opportunity for us as users of Magento to use this knowledge graph. And you'll see in this example here how you can include your ratings, your price, and whether a product's in stock. So Hummingbird was almost 2 years ago, and Google's continued to develop since then. And I want to talk to you about some of the other important ranking signals. So the first one is user intent. Now in this search, I've done a search for best surfboard. And what's important about this is that Google knows through this semantic processing that when I type best, I'm researching. I'm not ready to buy a surfboard yet. So what you can see here is that none of the results in the top 10 actually are e-commerce sites. All of them are comparison and review sites. And what you need to take away from this is it doesn't matter how hard you push the SEO team, what keywords you want to rank for. If your content won't match the user intent, you have no chance of ranking for these phrases anymore. The next signal is mobile. Now, you'll all be aware of the mobile-friendly tag, and you're probably all aware that it became a ranking signal back in April. Now, the bit I want to focus on for you is that, as you all know, it only affects searches conducted on mobile. But at present, we know that the whole of search, 29% of it is conducted on mobile phones. And that figure's only going to increase. And it's just a figure you can't afford to ignore anytime soon or in the future. The next thing is site speed. Many people don't realize that site speed is actually a ranking factor. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. If you've got two pages competing with pretty similar content, it makes much more sense to send someone to a page that takes 2 seconds to load rather than one that takes 7 seconds to load. So the next area I want to talk about is engagement. And this is the key area that we know Google is focusing on at the moment. And it's pretty hard to measure. And I want to talk to you about some of the kind of behavior we know they're monitoring at the moment over the next couple of slides, which is how they measure the engagement of your website. So the first one is browse rate. So when Google sends you to a site, it wants to see how many pages deep you're going in on that site. It wants to see how much time you're spending on that site. And it's looking at things like bounce rate. And it's doing that for a reason. It's trying to identify a behavior known as pogo sticking. So what's pogo sticking? Well, in this example, I've done a search for how do I make an apple pie. And I go to the top organic result, and I don't like that recipe much, so I go straight to the second. Go to the second, I can't stand that chef, I see him on TV all the time. Go straight to the third result. On the third result, I actually like this recipe. I might download it or pin it, or just spend a bit more time on that page. And Google realizes that that's the recipe that's matched my user intent. So what you'll expect to see is, over time, if they see that happening with lots and lots of users, you expect to see the one in position 3 start to climb up against the other organic positions. The final area I want to talk about in terms of engagement is amplification. Not just amplification, amplification of brands. Now, Google isn't usually transparent anymore about how it monitors things and what signals it uses, but it has come out and admitted that it's going to favor recognized brands online. So this is pretty bad news for startups, and I'm afraid it's something that's inevitable and it's not something we can do much about. But not only is it going to favor brands, it wants to see how many people are talking about these brands. So you'll probably hear the term again and again, content is king. And yes, that's true to a point. But content's not really that effective from an SEO point of view unless you have a plan for how you're going to amplify it, how you're going to get people to link to it, how you're going to get people to send their friends to it, to share it, all of those kind of things. And I suppose it can be summarized in one way. When you perform a search on Google, Google wants to ask itself, which is the brand with the most authority online to answer the question? So hopefully now when you take a look at this, you understand a little bit more about what we've been through up to this point. And this kind of ends the section on how the algorithm works. Next, I want to talk about how you can configure your Magento site to make the most of it. But before I do that, I just want to preface it with one point, really. So there's loads of great information online about SEO. And you guys can read all about this and make your own decisions. But I want you to keep one thing in mind. Most of the information is not specific to e-commerce. And e-commerce represents its own unique set of challenges. I mean, if you think about it rationally, if you're selling $10 widgets, it's going to be pretty difficult to write a killer piece of content that thought leaders all over the world are going to link to and is going to drive a lot of amplification. You need to understand that your challenge as an e-commerce store is actually to get your inventory indexed by Google. And you need to be working on your site maps and keeping on top of your online inventory. And I'm going to talk about that more in this section. So as I said, Panda's the thing with the most significant implications for your site. And hopefully when you look at this, 404s, 301s, rel canonicals mean something to you. And if they don't, they will do in a moment. And all of these are really just tactics you use to try and stop Google from seeing duplicate content. So I'm going to show you an example of this here. So this is one of my clients' websites. And on this page, the URL is just their domain name /product page, which is probably the same as your site's. Now this product exists in a category. So what actually happens is Magento by default creates another URL, one which is domain /category /product name. And what we're seeing here is Google will treat these as two separate pages, but the content's exactly the same. It's duplicate, and we know it doesn't like duplicate content. So we need to implement something called a canonical. We need to tell Google which version of this page it should index. Now we can do this in the Magento admin, and it's probably the most valuable setting in your Magento admin when you're looking at duplicate content. You need to go into System Configuration, Catalog Search Engine Optimizations, and you need to make sure that these two fields highlighted in yellow are set to yes. Also, when looking at duplicate content, you want to jump into Google Search Console, and you want to look under HTML improvements. And you want to look at how Google sees your titles and meta descriptions. So the titles are the blue bits in the search results, and the descriptions are the gray bits. And you want to make sure these are clean, and that there's no duplicate, short, or long, or blank content in these areas. And whilst you're in Search Console, you also want to look in crawl errors. And this is really important, because if you don't keep on top of this, I guarantee you as a Magento site, if you log into here, you'll see thousands of crawl errors. And this is what you call a 404. It's a broken page. And usually it's because you've disabled a product, it's out of stock, it's discontinued, and you haven't created a redirect to tell people visiting that page to go to a new page. And why is this important? Well, when Google's indexing it from your sitemap, it doesn't like a load of 404s, a load of errors. It will just give up and it won't index anything. But more importantly, from an SEO strategy, people might have linked to that previous product. And if you don't redirect it to anything, all that link equity that helps you rank isn't passed onto your site anymore. My next tip is for parameters. Now in Magento, you can go on a catalog page and you can usually refine results by specific attributes in Magento. So in this example here, we've got the URL for men's tops. And I actually want to filter these results by a specific activity type, which is travel. Now all this has done is it's just created less products on page, but there's nothing new. But you'll see the URL has actually changed. It's now got a question mark activity equals. And we need to tell Google to ignore this. And the reason for this is, once again, it's duplicate content. Now before I show you how to do this, I want to show you the implications if I hadn't done this for my client. So this client may have, a fairly large inventory, maybe 12,000 SKUs. But just this one parameter alone, and there's loads on their site, if we don't manage it correctly, we'll create an extra 22,500 URLs for Google to index, which obviously they're not going to like. So you manage this again in Search Console. You want to go under crawl URL parameters. And if you're comfortable in Search Console, go ahead and have a go. But if it's not something you've done before, I'd recommend getting a professional to do this, because you don't want to block any important content from being indexed by the search engines in the future. So my next tip is for product schema, so you can make use of the knowledge graph, you can get your ratings and so on in the search engines. Now there's a lot of extensions out there, but you really don't need to do this. I've provided two links here. One's to schema.org, which you could give to your front-end devs. And honestly, it will take about 15 minutes to add these tags into your product pages. And there's also another link for a testing tool, so you can test this on staging before you deploy it. And I've had some really great results doing this for some of my clients. The next thing is mobile. I'm not going to tell you how to build a mobile website, but I'm going to tell you some of the common errors I see when people don't get a mobile-friendly tag. So sometimes they have a great responsive site, but they've got an out-of-date robot text file, which in the past would tell Google to ignore JavaScript. Now, if we still tell Google to ignore JavaScript, it can't tell that your site's mobile-friendly. So it may be mobile-friendly, but you're not going to get this all-important tag. The other two errors it's looking for is, well, I see time and time again, is the viewport not configured to device width. And finally, leaving 5 pixels between buttons. Now, most people do this on the main part of the mobile site, but they always forget around footer links and things like that. So the final thing I really want to talk about is kind of rounding off this area, rounding off what we've talked about in terms of the Magento optimizations. So if you can tick all the boxes in this list, I don't expect you to suddenly shoot up the search engines and start ranking organically and getting loads more traffic. But what I can tell you is this, is if you don't do these, you don't have the basic foundations, and there really is no point concentrating on the all-important signals, the ones around engagement, good UX, testing things, doing great content. And this is the key driver for you. You know, having an e-commerce store, there needs to be a lot of skilled SEO techniques used in order to make your site crawled. But today, in order to rank organically, there are other things you need to consider. And I want to visualize this for you. So up until a few years ago, these are all the kind of skills you needed in order to rank a Magento website. And most of these aren't really marketing-led skills. Most of these are things for traditional SEOs. But now, with all the new ranking signals around engagement and Hummingbird and stuff, now there's all these other signals you have to start looking at. And the thing that's interesting about these signals is that most of these are creative. Most of these are marketing-led. Most of these are the kind of signals that people like me, traditional SEOs, we don't have these skills. You need to be a creative marketer. And really, I want to leave you with one final thought. For me, the brands that are going to do well in the future over the next couple of years are the ones who allow their marketing team to work with their SEO team, the ones who bring the SEO team in. They explain to the SEO team, this is our content calendar for the next year, these are our promotions. And they respect and understand the SEO's advice in terms of how you can optimize these campaigns and actually really get some rankings out of it. And by the same vein, SEOs need to get a lot better in understanding the marketing team and respecting them, because unless you work together, you're not going to be the real winners. And on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. We'll now open up the floor for any questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and we'll come over and hand you the mic before you ask it so we can get it on camera. A question over here?
Yep. Steve Church from Nestle. Just a quick question. Is there a correlation between, I guess, the expertise in this space, the organic space, and the potential savings you could make in that paid search space? So like if you shift your focus to getting this right from the outset, could you save a hell of a lot of money? And it sounds like you could on the other end. Absolutely.
So when you're talking of paid search, if you take the example of AdWords, when AdWords calculates ad rank, which is the formula for how much you have to pay in order to appear further up the page, it's actually looking at the quality score of your content. So some of the on-page SEO that you need to do in terms of optimizing for keywords, if that's relevant to the ads you're paying for, then you'll have a better ad rank, and then hence you have to pay less to bid in order to rank higher.
Hi, it's Kira Lee from Treasury Wine Estates. My question relates to the concept of COPE, so create once, publish everywhere. And from what I've seen presented here, that may, the duplication of this and the refarming of this content in same but different ways might have a negative impact on SEO. Is that a correct understanding? Or?
Yes, I suppose the best answer is, at best, Google will ignore the duplicates, and at worst, it could penalize for them. But you know, when you think of news, for example, the same news story exists on many sites, and Google's clever enough to work out that it's not going to, you know, penalize one of these news sites. It just might only choose one to rank for that story.
There's a question up front. Will you have access to this presentation after the event? And the answer is yes. You will have access on our website.
And kind of not only that, but when I've gone through specific modules on the algorithms, there's short links where you can read more about this. I mean, there's too much information to get in 25 minutes. And I encourage you to read some of those as well.
Hi, I'm Sunil. My question is, like, how to avoid the duplicate content issues in Magento multi-stores?
Sorry, how do you deal with duplicate content from different stores?
Issue in Magento multiple stores. Like, if I have a store for Australia, for New Zealand, and I have
Yep.
the same products. How I will avoid the duplicate content issue?
So there's a tag called hreflang, which is actually the tag you would use for the language you use. So, for example, hreflang en-au is for Australia, and if you had one in the UK, it'd be hreflang en/UK. But you also need to use, it's called link alternate, and you would say on the English page and the Australian page, you'd say the language on that page, and you'd say the alternate other language and give the web address for the other one. So you're actually helping Google. You're telling it, there is a duplicate of this, and it exists on this site because we're targeting a different language. Or
What about, I have say of 10,000 or 20,000 products, so I have to use that tag in all 20,000 pages.
well, you'd be using a product page template on Magento, so you just add it to that template, and then we do it by using a script in order to dynamically add the product URL on the end. Yeah, so you'd automate it.
Do we have any other questions? Any questions out there? Yep, right up front.
So similarly related to that, if you're running different websites of the same product base in the same country, is there a way to get around the duplicate content issue?
So in the past, a kind of tried and tested form of SEO would be, let's create loads of sites selling the same thing so we can take up more of the search engines. And Google's clever enough to work that out. So probably more likely than not, it will just index one of yours. And you want to avoid that being your staging site, which I've seen before. But yeah, it's probably just going to index one of them if they have the same descriptions and the same product pages, just different URLs.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mark.
Thanks.